Now, I'm a Hindu myself, South Indian, and I do not fancy an eternity in a bubble bath of flames in the sixth circle of hell, just because I heard a statement and disagreed with what someone may suggest was the word of Allah.
How are you guys doing? This is Sahar TV, and in this video we'll see an Oxford Union debate debating whether Islam is compatible with democracy. I don't even know why this isn't a debate, but let's watch.
Now, to delve into the motion itself, this House believes that Islam is incompatible with democracy. It's a straightforward motion with many, many ways to take it forward, but the way I shall be exploring this in today's speech is through the lens of Islam's use in modern-day power politics. I will not be elaborating too deeply on Islamic theology, for 9 minutes is just not enough time to go deep into Islamic philosophy. I will instead be addressing certain concepts of Islam's legitimacy in governments worldwide, of its use as a raison d'etre for political parties, particularly in Europe and India, and of its justifications it provides for anti-democratic actions and principles in various nations. So critically, the argument I will set out in this debate will focus on the incontrovertible fact that Islam and democracy are two irreconcilable concepts due to the fundamental principles via which they exist and operate when it comes to the approaches to governance and primarily accountability. The crux of the argument is Islam as a religion and democracy as a principle are incompatible on the basis of authority. In a democratic system, the authority to conduct actions lies in the hands of a collective decision-making body, a cabal of representatives, whether this is the US Senate, the British House of Commons, the Indian Lok Sabha, doesn't matter. In these deliberative bodies, issues can circle back to individuals' opinions or party principles or just general social attitudes in the socio-political climate. In other words, the decisions taken by the democratic government are, as Lincoln foretold, done by parties of the people, discussed by the people, and take sensible actions for the people. On the other hand, in Islamic governments, these positions of leadership and authority may be held by individuals with official positions in religious or government institutions, but the authority does not lie in their hands on principle. These individuals are just voices for what constitutes the word of God. Put another way, Islamic government, even one upholding democracy and allowing the representation of alternative groups and factions, does not make decisions based on a rational proportional measure of choice. Rather, it anchors decision-making to the concepts and virtues highlighted in the Quran and other religious texts, and allows interpretations of Allah's will to dictate the final say in any matter.
The government is dictated by the word of Allah, not by individuals. That's exactly the problem of Islam. Allah was not elected by the democratic majority in England. Therefore, Allah does not get to dictate what happens or what does not happen. Now, some people don't believe in God and some people don't want to be dictated by God. And in a democratic system where a collective decides, Islam is not compatible with democracy.
So the issue here arises when you anchor this to an incorporeal being. The issue in this debate is not whether God exists, so I'm not going to adopt that reasoning to explain myself.
Same.
Rather, I shall explain it as a means by which governments may absolve themselves of accountability by associating the decisions they take with the will of a higher being whose judgment cannot be questioned. Iran, in particular, is a good example of this. In the 50s and 60s, in Mossadegh's time, British and American influence hindered Iranian democratic processes, and this was only exacerbated after the Shah Reza Pahlavi was deposed in favor of Khomeini's Islamic Republic in 1979. Iran's Islamic theocratic government has time and again conducted actions that can be seen as anti-democratic, from the exclusion of women in positions of power, to the imposition of the hijab and veil, to the controversies with Ahmadinejad's elections in the early 2000s. This does not even align with the core tenets of Islam. Yet too often has the Islamic supreme theocracy dictated the parliaments and dialogue of the people of Iran, via Khomeini, Khamenei, other demagogues who claim to be the representatives of the ultimate authority on earth, the will of Allah, despite reinterpreting Quranic teachings for their own purposes. They have suppressed protest. They have limited opportunity, particularly to people belonging to groups that do not conform to the Islamic ideal, from women to members of the LGBT+ community, to ethnic and religious minorities in what was once one of the most diverse countries in the world. Furthermore, this is a problem that my own home country of India has seen since early modernity. Mughal Emperor Akbar's universal policy of peace, his Sulh-i-Kul, may indeed have been revolutionary for his time, but even so, the women and minorities of his court could hardly operate outside the shadows. I mean, who was Birbal, truly, more than a mere courtier?
He speaks too fast, in my opinion. It's making it incredibly difficult to focus on what he has to say. That's my only criticism.
Relied on his wits, his legacy as a children's tale to maintain political relevance and shape a narrative of false inclusivity. Islam as the religion of peace is another debate entirely, but I will attest that the only time in which peace and democracy are truly synonymous is in Star Wars. Even with a peaceful, tolerant version of Islam as suggested in the chapters of Mughal history and Indian history books, democracy is but a faraway concept that the ruling powers would scoff at. Democracy is a sophisticated framework with so many mechanisms to ensure that there's fair representation of all people in the country. Democracy ensures that decisions taken impact people in what is seen as the most positive way overall. I'm not going to go too deep into this because this is Rousseau and Mill, and that's my stuff for my tutorials. But democracy at its heart is messy, it is flawed even when it's full, and it fails very, very often. Islam is not incompatible because of its pitfalls in its philosophy or in apparent homogeneity. Islam's incompatible because even with its factionalism, even with its radically different sects of Sunnism, of Shiism, and so many others, ultimate power lies not in the hands of any one person or people, it lies in the intangible hands of Allah. Therefore, decisions and their impact are not anchored to a state or government that can be held accountable, but to an irrefutable concept of a supreme being that cannot and will not answer to humanity. Okay, now I'm sure this next point is going to turn a lot of heads and not very kind ones, but it's one I feel must be addressed when considering the concept of Islam in democracy. Democracy is, at its heart, fundamentally an inclusive, diverse, and tolerant ideology that promotes discourse amongst people with vastly different value sets. It allows for the proportional representation of every group in the country, no matter their background, and in collective decision-making. But Islam, at its most fundamental basis, set out in the Quran and supporting texts, does not. It is inherently missionary. It seeks to convert or proselytize all people of this world to Islam.
Yeah.
Now, some may argue against me once again, stating that this is not what Islam calls for. The only truth is that this concept is integral to Muslim scholarly research and has order. Of course. Conception since 610. Nevertheless, a core part of its doctrine does indeed believe Muslims to be infidels, non-believers in the standards they set out, doomed to an eternity in what can only be described as a Muslim conception of Dante's Inferno. Now, I'm a Hindu myself, South Indian, and I do not fancy an eternity in a bubble bath of flames in the sixth circle of hell, just because I heard a statement and disagreed with what someone may suggest was the word of Allah. While some of you may rebuke my statement on this Islamic concept of Jahannam, and you call it blunt or lacking nuance, I must state this. Why must anyone suffer eternally for the finite number of sins they commit in a lifetime, which is finite? This argument has pervaded discussions from The Guardian, Islamic scholarly research, to even the Indian government's talking points, but they all point in one direction. Islam's inherently exclusionary. Islam's core principles serve to exclude those who do not conform to its religious umbrella,
Yep.
and sometimes even marginalize those belonging to second-class groups within countries. And thus, it's made it inconciliable with any Western model of government or authority. For whether it is approached politically or not, the inclusion of Islam into a model of human freedom cannot allow for the coexistence of a pluralistic, fair democracy. I also had a bit on populist to say, but I think I will avoid that for now, given that we're running short on time. But frankly, do consider this statement. I'm not saying that Islam is the only religion which faces the issue of populism, demagogues, and extremists who will use it to pander narratives to their favor, but the entire concept of religion and government is very easily exposed to this. The whims of power-driven populists who use these narratives to propagate fear and hysteria through divine authorities they claim to represent will seek power for their own interests rather than for the collective population that democracy calls for. Democracy is factional and federalist in nature, and as Hamilton and Jay wrote, doesn't just promote but needs dissenting voices to function in its truest, most sophisticated form. Just let me conclude, this won't take more than 10 seconds. On the other hand, despite there being radically different sects within Islam's overarching framework, the reliance on its legitimacy being tied to an authority of a higher being, Allah, and hence following a monotheistic belief structure that absolves individuals and governments of accountability, makes
Stop ringing that bell.
them fundamentally contradictory. I urge this House to digest what I and other members of the proposition will have to argue and vote in our favor at the end of this debate. Thank you.
Listen, he spoke very fast. It was very difficult to concentrate. But on the other hand, I fully agree with this guy. If democracy is the people coming together to choose the government, the leadership, then how can a totalitarian system who is dictated by the will of Allah be compatible with democracy? It makes no sense. Islam is not compatible with democracy. 100% it's not compatible. There's no free speech, no free will. Everything is the will of Allah. You speak against Allah, bad things happen. You speak against Muhammad, bad things happen. I don't think that's something anybody wants in the Western world or in the world in general. I think the reason why Islam is so big is because people are scared to leave it. Because once they do, the capital punishment could be presented. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you'd like to support me financially, you can do that using Buy Me Coffee or Patreon down in the link in the description. Don't forget to join our Discord in the link below, and now you can become a YouTube member and enjoy specific YouTube perks. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.